Hey, thanks for joining us today. My name is Matt Sledge, the host of the next CFO, and today I am here with Diana. Diana, great to have you join us today.
Thank you for having me, Matt. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we'll get into the financial specific conversation background. It's an honor to have you today. But before we do, we like to do a little rapid fire just to get the creative juices flowing, relax a little because this isn't a, we like to try and make this not an overly stuffy financial podcast. So I'll throw some unofficial time on the clock and we'll get started. Are you ready?
Sure.
All right. Who is your favorite musician?
Bruce Springsteen.
Bruce Springsteen, awesome. What is your favorite hobby?
I like baking quite a bit.
Oh, baking.
A lot of baking. Yeah.
Nice. Is there a particular baked good you love to bake more than anything
Well,
else?
it changes by the season. Right now, I'm into the pumpkin, trend. So I'm doing pumpkin tiramisu. I'm doing pumpkin
Oh,
bread pudding, pumpkin everything. So anything that has
nice.
pumpkin right now, and then I'm sure it'll change in a couple of months. It'll change to something else. But right now, I'm into all the pumpkin, everything pumpkin.
Nice. I love tiramisu, so that sounds amazing. What is your favorite way to unwind after work?
I like to go for walks. Just to unwind, listen to some music, just get some exercise and fresh air. So that really kind of helps me grounded, and then I come back and I'm ready for whatever it is that I have to do at that juncture. But that's really a good way for me to really unwind. Sometimes I do that in the middle of the day when I really need a break from just
Sure.
things. And I just go around the house maybe sometimes just for 5 minutes, and that gets me some fresh air and some sun, and I'm back. I'm back ready to tackle whatever's next. So that's always going to be
Nice.
something good for me.
Always good to ground and reset. Can't beat that. Do you? Is there a place you like to travel, or somewhere you've traveled that you like the most?
Um, you know, this is not very different, but I really like Mexico. I mean, I've been to a lot of places in Europe and parts of Asia and South America, but I really like Mexico because it really forces me to relax. There's not really much for me to do other than to decide which pool I need to go to and what restaurant I need to eat at. And that is so relaxing for me that I don't have to do any other thinking. And so that's my favorite site. And actually, I live really close to Mexico now that I'm in Dallas. It's only 2 hours away. So I try to go there as much as possible because it's really close, from from a flight perspective, it's only a couple
Yeah.
hours. So, it's almost like faster there than driving to Austin. So that really works
Yeah.
out well for me.
Absolutely. I love Mexico. Is there a particular city or place that you love?
Yeah, we usually go to the Moon Palace in Cancun, and we've
Nice.
been frequent visitors there. And it's been just very consistent as far as service, the food, the quality, and actually we've met a lot of good people there that we've stayed in touch with and happened to be there at the same time we're there, and so that really worked out really well for us. So yeah, Moon Palace. I've been to other locations as well, but we tend to go back to the Moon Palace over and over again, and we like the one that's adults only. So now that our older, we did a lot of vacations with our kids when they were younger, but now my tolerance for little kids has become really, really short. So I'd rather be in a place where I see more adults, and I think that's part of the vacation is really to be able to interact with like-minded
Yeah.
people and people of your age and whatnot. So that really works out really well for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. And second to last question, do you have a book you're reading right now or a favorite book if you're not in the middle of one right now?
I do have a favorite book, and I've already read it twice, and I'm rereading it for the third time, and it's Atomic Habits. And
Okay.
every time I read it, I hone in into one or two things that I adopt in my day to
Hmm.
day and so forth. So I find that every time I'm reading it, I discover something else or I discover something new. There's a lot of rich information there and a lot of actions that you can take as a professional.
Yeah.
And so I feel like rereading it sometimes just gets me really, a great understanding. The first time I read it, it was like, wow, this is great, this is great. But then I wasn't able to really apply anything because there was so much. And then the
Mm-hmm.
second time I honed in on a few things, and now I'm reading it the third time and I'm honing on even more stuff. So that seems to be, a big asset for me as far as keeping that book and rereading it a couple of times.
Awesome. Yeah, we've got a the next CFO book
Yeah,
list probably that we're gonna release as well.
oh,
So
nice.
glad to add another one to that. I appreciate that.
That's awesome. That's
Um,
great.
yeah. All right. And final question. I know you have two kids. Which one is your favorite? I'm just joking. You don't have to answer that.
Thanks for actually. I'm not gonna say it. In case they listen to this, I mean, nah, I need to stop.
Yeah, don't answer that. I always do that. I just like to see the pause on people's face, but I don't ever want anyone to actually answer that. So yeah, I have said I should just say family member because then spouses can say their,
Oh, okay, yeah, that's
spouses
easy.
things like
It's my
that.
knowledge, no doubt.
Yeah,
He's definitely has my back and supportive. The kids,
that's
it
all.
depends on the day of the month, right?
Yeah,
But they're great kids. I love them dearly, but sometimes I like one more than the other for sure. No
sure.
doubt.
And it can change depending
Yes.
on the month,
Oh,
probably too.
changes by the day, right?
You could be like Deion Sanders and have a ranking board of your children to let them know, and then they can compete to see who
Right.
takes
Well,
the
I
top spot.
I will tell you, I have one daughter, one son, and I used when they were younger, I used to say, "You're my favorite daughter," and I would go to my
Yeah.
son and say, "You're my favorite son." And for a while, they really kind of believed that they were the favorite child, until
Yeah.
they got to an age, and I'm like, "You're my favorite daughter," and she's like, "Well, I'm the only daughter." I'm like, "Yeah, that's exactly right."
Yeah.
So for a while it worked, even though I didn't really mean it that they were more favored than the other, but that really kind of
Yeah.
was funny for a while. Me and my husband would laugh about it all the time. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
That's awesome. My brother-in-law says I'm his favorite brother-in-law from Alabama. So, and the same way, I'm the only one from Alabama. So,
That makes sense. That's
yeah,
great.
good stuff. Well, let's jump into the real reason we're here, and that's to talk some finance and background. And we're just really honored and pleased to have you. You know, you and I met at a leadership conference in Dallas. I'm really plugging them a lot because I've had two or three guests from that conference on. So again, that networking and those networking opportunities are real and really work. But I have a lot of questions for you, but before we jump right in, can you just give us a brief background of, and we're going to get into kind of your work history and things like that. So don't feel like you need to cover it all, but just a quick introduction of who you are and why we're here today.
Sure. Phil, thanks for the question. So I'm originally from the Middle East. I came to the United States when, right after high school, I came on a scholarship to study, and really my first role was at PwC right after college, and that's where I got my CPA license and my training. So I'm a CPA, still active, and that's my training. And I always say that while I'm an accountant, I'm also, yeah, an accountant that's very business focused. And that's really what got me into some of the roles that I've had, which have not only been traditional accounting roles, but also the CFO roles, some planning and budgeting roles, some operational business operational roles, and whatnot. So I would say, while my training has always been in accounting and controls and the governance and the discipline around, reporting and whatnot, but I've really expanded and explored a bit more that made me who I am now. Um, I'll also say that I've changed industries quite a bit, and that was
Mm-hmm.
intentional. I'm always looking to learn something different and new, and I always feel that the accounting can be very much applied similarly from one company to the other. The values, the
Sure.
principles, the
Yeah.
process improvements, the automation, all of that can really be packaged as a service that you can take to any company. What
Yeah.
becomes to be really exciting is if you're in a new industry or a new area that you haven't worked with before, such as what I've done. that's really gets me going because I'm now interested in learning about our competition. I'm interested to learn about how the warehouse works. What's the supply chain like? What's the
Yeah,
vendors like? And that's usually different by industry. And there's also some nuances, and that really gets me excited. And it now becomes, and the accounting now becomes a little bit more applicable. And even though it's very similar, but there's also some things that I can adjust because of the industry and what I know. So that's kind of a little bit about my background. I've done everything intentional. Every step of my career has been. I wouldn't say I had anticipated it or predicted it, but it really
sure.
turned out to be well thought of. And I'm glad I made some of the decisions I made, and I'm glad I also left some companies when I did. So it all kind of worked out, and I'm really blessed. So
That's
um,
awesome.
yeah.
That's great to hear. And based on that, kind of what you said, it really comes across, and these are our words, not anything predefined, but, through all that experience, it's through my own research of you, your profile, your history, it really becomes apparent that you've been a titan in the finance world. One of the best at what you do than I've researched and seen. And you've held a lot of impressive leadership roles across finance, operations, and most recently at Rivad. What initially drew you to finance, and what's kept you passionate through all those varied careers? I know you said that the diversity of the different companies really engages you, but is there anything else? And again, what initially grabbed you to end up at PwC and then to just keep going?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that question in one moment, but you know how
Sure.
often you get it with a bunch of accountants and say, well, if you were to redo all of this, would you be an accountant or would you choose something else? And most people will say, I would have chosen something else. I'd be the one that would say, no, I would have chosen
Yeah.
where I ended up. I grew up with a household of accountants and business professionals and bankers. My dad was a
Okay.
banker at Barclays Bank. So ever since I was very young, I would be frequenting his work. I would get exposed to some of the elements of his work in the business environment and whatnot. And that really got me interested in that field. And then I also was exposed to other professions throughout my family, and none of that really interested me. Like on the engineering side or medical side or even anything else, law. None of that really kind of was appealing to me. And I think part of it is because I was really good in math and didn't want to be a teacher. And that's a typical answer. You're good in math.
Yeah.
You don't want to be a scientist because you're not really, you can't stand, certain, I didn't really like physics, but I did like everything else. But I really liked math, and I also liked solving problems. And I thought that this is exactly what my dad was all about. He was very good in math, but he also was a very good problem solver, and he had a lot of good interpersonal skills. So he was able to combine his people skills and love for people with solving problems and helping others, as well as his, love for math and his
Yeah.
comfort in math. So since he followed that path and went into business and accounting and in finance, I thought, well, then that's the path I'll take. And
Sure.
I was really, mentored by him quite a bit, and I was also exposed to others in the profession at a young age as well. Besides my father, there was others also in the community that we dealt with because of my
Hmm.
father's role that were really in that field that gave me also a better perspective and more of a perspective.
That's awesome. And
Yeah.
it's beautiful how much of a mentor your father was.
Yes.
Uh, that's really great. So I have to ask, on top of that, beyond your father, did you have any other really instrumental mentors that you feel like really kind of incubated your passion or helped guide you along the way? Was there a CFO that helped, that you felt maybe really, okay, this, now I understand what it means to be a CFO and what I need to strive for? Or was it a CEO? Or yeah, I'm just curious.
You know, well, I've had a lot of mentors in my life. I would say probably a good dozen of them throughout my career. And
Sure.
a lot of them I stay in touch with till today. And each of them have really inspired me to do something different. I'll start out with when I first came to the United States. came from a very small town, and I didn't really have, there was no internet at that time, as you can imagine. Cell phones weren't even there. So everything was new to me. And when I met actually my now husband, he also was a CPA, and we met at a birthday party, and he told me he was a CPA, and I said, "Well, what does that stand for? What is that? What is that?" And he had to explain to me what a certified public accountant was and how he went about getting it and whatnot. And I was just inspired. I was like, well, that's what I want to be, you know? And so I would say it started out there, and obviously the relationship ended up being, you know, a romantic one, and then we ended up getting married, and now we've been married for over 30 years. So that worked out really well.
Congrats.
But and also, yes, I think in the work field, I would say every leader I've worked with or for, whether they were CFOs or global controllers or CAOs or even CEOs and whatnot, or other business executives, have been a mentor to me in one way or another. Whether it
Sure.
was formal or informal, I would say I was always observing, you know, what's working, what's not working. Here's
Yeah.
some things that I want to adopt when I become a leader in that position, and here's some things I would like to avoid. And just by keeping, and I used to keep a log of, you know, when you have this issue with a employee, for instance, here's the best way to handle it because so and so did it that way and it really was a good outcome. Or I would, you know, also kind of observe, you know, leaders that have not been very inspiring for me, that maybe I did not want to mimic that behavior, and I would just be aware of it. So self-awareness
Sure.
was really good for me, and also tracking that and just being very intentional about what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. Most of that is because of the observations of the mentors. Now, I did have some formal mentors that have taken on some investment in me personally, and I'm grateful for that. And one of which is a audit committee chair that I've worked with, actually for a very short period of time when I was a CFO at a company most recently. And she was a very big advocate of myself and my role and the accomplishments. And she was very authentic and genuine. And I don't think she did it because I was a woman and she was a woman. I think she did it because and the reason I know that is because she pointed out some things that no one else probably noticed.
Oh,
And
nice.
I was really kind of grateful for that. And we just hit it on, and I still call her till today. And we really are become really good friends. But she is my go-to if I have a question about anything,
Yeah.
or even if I'm just struggling with the way I'm thinking about something, and I maybe I'm on the right track, but I need someone to reinforce it or to confirm it for me,
Yeah.
and I'd be calling
Nudge
her
you.
and asking her that. So, and she was a CFO, she was a CEO in her career. She's had a fantastic career in her journey, and I look up to her all the time.
That's awesome. That's a very, very beautiful thing and nice to have. And I gotta say, your romance story through accounting certification, we're gonna have to get that on Hallmark or something one
Yeah.
day. That's great. That's
Right.
great. That's great. So I'm curious. We've discussed a little bit about how your career's transitioned, your journey. You've been working over 30 years, I think, at several well-known companies. But now I understand you're kind of transitioning to work. And if I mess this up, just correct me, please. But working on board work, advisory work. I think you use the word yourself on like a portfolio job structure, and even coaching other CFOs. Can you talk a little bit about that pivot, what that's been like, and where you've ended up, and maybe kind of what motivated it?
Sure. Well, as we talked about before, my dad was a big instrumental character and mentor for me. And he retired at age 55 and he had 6 kids. So he was intentional about when he wanted to retire. And I thought that was so beautiful that he was able to retire at a young age and
Yeah.
really spend a lot of time with the family, grandkids, and whatnot, and had a really good quality retirement. And so, in addition to being inspired by his career and what he's done, I was also inspired by that. So I also had a goal that when I get to a certain age, which happens to be 55, that I also will retire. And similarly, I would like to have a rich, kind of chapter in my life and career to be fulfilling, but not necessarily in a work environment where I'm in a corporate environment, actually as an employee. So I've been planning this for a few years, and the time has come. And back in July, I took the step in retired, or I would say semi-retired from a corporate role. And now I'm focusing on four things. And I will tell you that I am busier than I've ever been. And
I was gonna say, this not nothing about you says retired. Like, and hey, I'll say this as well. Nothing about you says 55 as well. So
right, right,
both of those,
right.
congratulations, I
Well,
guess,
thank
on
you.
the definitely on the not appearing 55, but semi congratulations on failing at retiring.
Right, right, exactly. I mean, I have failed actually. But, so what I'm doing right now is focusing on four different things. And I need to really be careful. I was just thinking about that not too long ago. Yesterday, I think I'm like, okay, I'm stretched now. And I need to be able to focus and really kind of decide what I want to do. So there are four things I'm focusing on. The first one is board service. I am an audit committee chair of a public company called Tandy Leather Factory here in Fort Worth, and I'm also a board member of the comp committee and the overall board. So that is, one sector where I'd like to be on boards. I'd like to be able to bring my experience that I've had for many, many years and just bring it to the boardroom, and as a financial expert, that's always helpful, but also I have that operational experience that I've gained from different companies as the COO and other roles that I've had. The second one is an advisor or an advisory role, whether it be those are small companies or big companies, actually, family owned businesses that are generational businesses, and those could be multi-billion dollar companies, ESOP businesses, or private equity held, or public for that matter. So these are more informal, non-fiduciary roles that are more of an advisor, where you're actually advising management and maybe helping them out with a project or an item that they need assistance with. In that, there's no independence in that relationship, and it really depends on what's needed. And sometimes I'm just being a coach and a mentor to the CFO or to the CEO. Sometimes I'm helping with fundraising. I could be helping with establishing a board or setting up charters for what the board should look like, or
Sure.
an M&A transaction, or you name it. It can be it's there. Then the third thing is mentoring, and I've joined an organization, and this is really a good for everyone to look into. It's called Upnotch. It's a non-for-profit,
Okay.
and it's a volunteer organization that basically matches mentors and mentees on various topics, depending on your expertise and depending on the interest of what mentees would like to seek. And also, as a mentor, which I'm operating as a mentor, I'm also a mentee. So I'm always looking for also people on the platform that I could benefit from.
That's
And it's
awesome.
basically a very organized platform. You have your profile, you sign up. If people see that you have something of value, they'll schedule some time with you based on your availability. And you basically can mentor them in any topic they would like to talk about. And most of the time, those ends up being relationships that you build. And while you're only talking for a couple of times, you end up being really um, you build a stronger relationship, and you become more of an advocate for them, regardless of whether you're meeting on the platform or outside of the platform. So that's a great way for me to give back, and I
Yeah.
love the platform. I think the founder has done a fantastic job, and I've actually met a lot of great people all over the world, actually, from not just
Oh
from the
wow.
US. I mean, there are members from everywhere. I've just met with someone from New Zealand that's starting his own business and
Oh
wanted to
wow.
get some help on some things, and I was like, okay, this is great. And so that's been another area. And then the fourth one is academia. And that's an area that I'm still exploring. I'm looking into how I can get to the classroom and really help the new generation of students, MBA students and beyond, and all kinds of students, to really kind of navigate the job market. I
Sure.
had it easy because I went to a big four. That was a
Mm-hmm.
very natural, uh, transition from college. I had my job offer when I was a junior. I didn't even really go through a lot post graduation because I already had an offer about to start. But I do know that in today's world, it's much tougher for business majors and graduates to really start their journey. If they're into the financial accounting and being wanting to be a CPA, that may be easier because there are a lot of firms out there, big four and regional firms
Mm-hmm.
and local firms that you can start with. But if you're not taking that path of a CPA and you're not looking to be an investment banker, what do you do? And where
Yeah.
do you get started? And I feel like I can do a lot of, you know, guidance there, starting with internships and really actually looking into, programs that companies often have that I've led when I was in corporate. I've led a lot of not just internships, but really programs to bring students into the work field and get them exposure to the work field. And then from there, it could end up being a position. So kind of like an
Yeah.
internship, but it could be less formal or it could be very formal. And I think a lot of companies, still do that. And I think it's a matter of finding the right match and
Yeah.
the right our organization. So those are the four things. As far as the academia is concerned, I don't know if I'll be ever like a professor or like a teacher or anything like that, because I know my kids tell me you will be a terrible teacher. But I do think that my teens have always said like, you tend to like to explain things and you like to go into the why. And I said, yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's you
Yeah.
have to understand the why, not just what you have to do. So, I mean, I do have a bit of passion for teaching. So we'll see how that goes. But I'm exploring some avenues there. And so that would be my fourth chapter. So, as you can imagine, I'm quite busy. And I'm very satisfied intellectually, quite frankly. I mean, that's one of the things I was concerned about is, yes, if I'm going to retire, I want to stay relevant. I want to stay active on my CPA. I want to know
Sure.
what's going on in the world. I want to know what's going on with the companies that I just left and how things are evolving, what's happening with AI. And so this is all these things that I talked about are keeping me in the loop, very relevant and very up to date. And that is really something that I'm really enjoying right now.
That's awesome. Yeah. I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you. I'm gonna give you an F on retirement. And don't listen to your kids. They're your favorite and least favorite daughter and son. So just take it with a grain of salt. I think you'd be a great teacher.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that's great. But yeah, you're gonna fail at retirement. But I think that's a healthy thing. As long as you
Yeah.
give yourself time for those walks and to travel to Mexico, I think you'll be great. That's an amazing thing. So as we continue to move through that, and I think that's awesome how you've transitioned. You've talked a lot about having a career that spanned a very diverse group of businesses. Retail, technology, consumer products. Were there any core principles or values that have just consistently guided your leadership approach and really led to success along the way?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I always operated with a set of principles that would be applicable for a finance organization. And
Mm-hmm.
usually within the first 60 days, I would roll these out to my new group and really talk about what they are. And I'm happy to go through them. And some of them are applicable, some of them I adjust. But really, one of the first one is a single point of accountability,
Mm-hmm.
where you have one person's neck to choke or one person to thank for any, success or non-success. And I've been at some companies where you really don't know who's accountable. And
Sure.
no one really knows if they're accountable. And it's always like, well, I think he's going to do it. No, she's going to do it. And so I always work through these principles. Like for everything, any deliverable, there has to be a single point of accountability, even though you're leveraging other team members in the input, in the process. But accountability has to be with one person. So in the set of
Mm-hmm.
financials, for instance, the accounting for The balance sheet, the P&L, that's the controller, whether that's coming from some information is coming from the business, from HR, from legal, but there has to be one single point of accountability for the accuracy and whatnot. So that's one principle that I always use. The second one is constant improvement. And I grew up in a world when I was using, you know, I would say 11 columns or 13 columns audit papers. There was
Yeah,
no real technology at the time. But there was always ways to improve without even much technology that we know today. But imagine now with technology. I mean,
sure.
about 10 years ago, I started looking into robotics and RPAs because it was available for us to streamline some transactional, activities. And now
Yeah,
look at AI. So I think having a mindset of there's always ways to improve, there's always more room for improvement, even though we've just, done a big major implementation or some major project that really enhanced things. It doesn't mean that we're done because there's always
sure.
opportunities because technology doesn't stop, and so
Yeah,
neither should we. And then I think the third thing would be is in addition to obviously the principles around controls and keeping good controls and discipline and whatnot, is integrity and doing the right thing for the company. So as an
yeah,
accounting function, finance function, we're usually called the gatekeepers of the finance and the financials. So you see a lot. And I always warn my team, like, don't overreact because sometimes you're going to see things and you're going to think it's like, this could be fraud or this could be, something a big problem. But you need to really learn the big picture and
yeah,
really understand all aspects before you raise the red flags. But in the same time, if you do raise the red flags, this is your job. And I feel like that's been really a good principle to have as a tone of the talk to my teams that we will not tolerate anything that doesn't look appropriate, not just
yeah,
from a legal perspective, but what's right for the business.
yeah.
So those are key
Absolutely.
principles that I've always had. But then as far as the team's concerned, I like to empower the team, and I always say, I am convincible. Here's my thoughts. Here's what I think we should do. But if you have a better way, I am convincible. You just tell me why, how, where, and how you're going to go do it. And you may very well convince me because I don't know all the answers. And
Sure.
so oftentimes the team would be like, well, I'm not sure if I should like tell you this because you've already made up your mind. And I'll say, no, I'm convincible. So try me. And many times I have pivoted to what the team has suggested or what the team has asked because it was a better idea and they've taught me something different. And they were very, very well prepared and they were right. And so I would say empowering the team in the true meaning of empowerment, not just
Sure.
the words, but really allowing them to take on some risk. Sometimes they will make some mistakes, but that's the only way they're going to learn and they get better.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think those are great values as well. I think the integrity section and doing what's right, both legally and for the business is really a point of emphasis that all accountants need to have. I had a mentor uh, at a young stage of my career that she basically fell on the sword for that, and at the time it seemed against leadership that was not for that. I'll give her a shout out, Jennifer Coleman. And at the moment, it seemed really rough that she wasn't rewarded for that integrity. But in the end, her career really went in the right direction, and she received some flowers that she deserved, which was great. And then I'll say, I think what you said about the team and being convincible. I really love the way you said that because what do you have a good team around you for if you're not going to leverage them to their full capability? And I think that goes right in line with some other leaders we've talked to as well about staffing a staff with not being afraid to hire staff that may be smarter than you. And I'm not saying that's what your staff was, but
They
allowing
were,
them
they were
there.
smarter.
Yeah, there you go. Allowing not being afraid to admit when they have a better idea than you and really leveraging that full value. I think that humility and openness is really a beautiful thing, and I think it's something that has there's a couple of unifying things: always developing, always teaching and learning, but then also not being afraid to let your team guide the way. Have all been kind of reoccurring themes with the leaders we've talked to. So I'm great to hear from you as well. So, we met at a CFO leadership conference in Dallas, which was a great event. And you, as I understand it, have a knack for networking and involved in many organizations such as NACD, PDA, like I said, CFOLC, and then Women in Retail Leadership Circle. And I think more than that. How has your involvement in these networks really shaped your leadership style and your own professional growth? And what's the value you really gain from them and you'd like to communicate maybe to our listeners?
Well, I will tell you that I was not very active when I was in the corporate world with my network. And that is probably the one mistake I would say. And although I've heard it all the time, like you need to stay active with your network, you need to really make an effort and invest in that. But the reality is I had no time. And by the time when I signed up for something, it was always a drag. I always had to drive an hour to get to somewhere. So I would just opt for not participating.
Yeah.
And now that I'm in this portfolio career that I talked about earlier, I am finding out, obviously more time, but also interest of mine is to really kind of network with others. So one, I can learn from them, and two, they can learn from me. It's a way for me to interact with people, right?
Yeah.
I like to work with people, and when you're in this semi-retired kind of mode, you're not necessarily working with a team. I'm talking to
Yeah.
a lot of people, but it's different. So one is wanted to really interact with like-minded professionals. So that was one. Two, I'm hoping that the interactions in the network will lead me to either being able to help in one way or another, whether it be through academia, through networking, a board seat, or whatnot. So there's definitely something in for me, and that is not. There's nothing shameful about that. I think most people are networking for those purposes, and to also connect the
Sure.
dots.
Yeah.
And I find it to be what I'm realizing right now is I'm seeing themes in some of these organizations, and I am now able to connect the dots and say, well, you need to talk to so and so at this organization because I think what you're looking for is here. And being able to connect the dots is like solving the problem, right? And
Yeah.
that's what used to give me satisfaction when I was in the corporate world. So how do I find that here, other than teaching
Yeah.
and mentoring, is to really connect people together. And I find that to be really exciting. And, to be honest, it's the content also in keeping me relevant. I mean,
Yeah.
you remember from the CFO leadership, there was a lot of good content there
Yeah.
that is of quality that everybody needs to know, and whether you're
Hmm.
in the workforce or not in the workforce. And it keeps me fresh and relevant. And oftentimes I take some of these topics, I'm like, I want to understand more about this. I want to kind of learn more about this one item. So I go
Hmm.
deep on some things after I hear them in a conference or a webinar or in person. And the fact that we're now back from COVID, and Dallas is really good for that. There's a lot of in-person
Yeah.
networking events, and it's fun. You get to go, you meet people, you have a drink or two, and you interact, and what's wrong with that, right? I mean, it's like
Yeah.
fun, right? So all of that together, and they're really great organizations. They all have missions and mission to really assist in one way or another. And I find them to be very valuable. And I will say the one regret that I have is I wish I was a little bit more active and more involved when I was in the corporate world, when I
Sure.
was very busy working, in raising a family, dealing with elderly parents and whatnot. I really never prioritized networking. And
Sure.
while I wouldn't have been able to do what I'm doing now because I have a little
Yeah.
more time, but even at a small scale, it would have been very helpful for me.
Sure.
But there's always time to catch up, just like I am, and you can always, it's always there for you whenever a professional is ready. It's going to be here for you, and
Yeah.
so that's really been good.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's a great. That's a great way to look about it, and that's how people like you and I meet. So
Yeah,
and you end up
there you
on
go.
great podcasts. So,
Yeah.
and I'll just go. Hey, let's give it a shot. Anyone that needs any mentorship in academia, Diana would be great. Reach out. That may be listening. So hopefully that leads
Yeah.
to something.
Okay.
Um, As a member of, in particular, the Women in Retail Leadership Circle and a mentor on the Upnotch platform, what advice would you offer to women and other underrepresented groups aspiring for senior finance roles or to become the next CFO?
You know, I have a lot of advice I can give, but I'm gonna, limit it to one, and that is invest in your reputation. And what I mean by that is how you show up to meetings, how you enter companies, how you exit companies, how you show up on social media,
Yeah,
how you show up with the board. That is all an investment, and you need to be intentional as to how your image and your reputation is being perceived.
sure.
And I think that has been a driving force for me in making most of my decisions as to whether I'm leaving a company or joining a company or doing whatever I need to do. That's always been in the forefront is how is this going to impact my reputation? I've worked so
Yeah,
hard to get to where I am. I've worked so hard to make sure things are done right and that things are doing, based on what's right for the company. How do I maintain that and keep that? Because one little
yeah,
thing can really damage all of that. So I would say
sure.
pay attention to your reputation and how you show up socially, on social media, on the platforms, as well as in person. And as you show up and as you exit companies, many people burn their bridges on their way out. And I always say, well, that's your network.
Yeah,
That is the network that you're going to have when you leave and go somewhere else. Who else do you have?
yeah.
You lean back to the folks that you worked with in the previous company. And so I would say that's the biggest advice. I mean, obviously there's a lot more we can talk about, but I thought that this was important. At least it was very important for me, and I thought it would be important for men and women alike to
Sure.
really focus on their reputation and their image everywhere they show up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great advice, and especially for accountants that sometimes thinks if I just have the best grasp of the numbers that anyone has, that'll be all. That's all I need. I don't have to worry about presentation or reputation or anything like that. And I think we've all, whether we want to admit it or not, have been on the verge of our exit of a company and just wanted to burn it all down and tell so and so how we really felt. And it's never a good idea to follow through with that, and it never serves you well in the end. So I think that's great advice as well. You never know who you'll be sitting across next, interviewing with, or asking for help, finding your next landing spot. So both great pieces of advice for sure. So thanks for that. So, you've led teams through significant digital and organizational transformations as well. What strategies have been the most effective in driving alignment, engagement, and resilience within your teams and the company during those times of change?
Yeah. Well, I'd say first of all, you've got to win their hearts before their minds. Meaning, you need to establish a relationship with them, get to know them. Who are they? Do they have families? Are they struggling with an elderly at home? So really get genuinely to know who they are and what's important to them.
Sure.
I think that's number one in general. Because when it comes to then making a change, you've got to enlist them and you have to do that up front. And I know you hear about that all the time. And it does take time and it may slow things down because you need to get everyone on the same page. But if you have that up front, then things will go smooth and things will accelerate and the projects will be successful. And you do that in a number of ways. One is you have to be a good listener. You have to be an open-minded. I mean, I often go in and say, here's what we're going to do because this is the best thing to do.
Sure.
And then I end up taking a different route all by itself because
Yeah.
of the things we talked about, because there's something else I didn't realize, or I didn't factor a matter that I should have factored in, or maybe the resources are, not ready or whatever the case may be. So I think being a great listener, really enlisting speaking about the why. And I often come and say, listen, I've got an issue. I need to do this, this, and that. And here's the reason why I need to do it. And I need your help. I'm thinking I can go and implement this and this, and I can achieve that. Do you think that's going to work? And often they'll say, yeah, I mean, we should have done this a long time ago. Or they'll say, no, I think you're missing the point. In order to get to what you need to accomplish for the company, you're doing the wrong thing. This is not what's going to work. And so I think being open-minded to the fact that I may not be, I, you know, right on what I'm trying to accomplish to enlist
Yeah.
change. Change is the constant. I know we all hear that. And you also need to have people that work with you that are comfortable with change. And the reality is, while we all say, oh, yeah, change is coming and change is the constant, most of us don't really like to deal with change because
Yeah.
it's uncertain, it's unpredictable. You don't know what the future will look like. Am I going to have a job? Am I not going to have a job? All that wonderful stuff that starts, humans start to
Bubbling
think
up.
about. But
Yeah.
the reality is, and having hindsight is, at the end, everything works out. It really does.
Yeah.
And I always say, like, if this is not the right organization for you and you end up leaving, believe me, you're going to look back and say that's the best decision I've made because you're
Sure.
not happy or you're not in alignment or whatnot. But also, if you think this change is going to be, if you think you're taking risk, try it. You never know what may happen. And there's always
Yeah.
options. We live in a land of many opportunities. So I do think that change is difficult for people. And it's not as easy as we all think it has. It's become, even though we deal with it on a daily basis. But I think
Sure.
we need to be empathetic and we need to take it easy and slowly and really get the right people on the same page most of the time if you are really, driven to get there and you've got
Yeah.
the alignment. But there are gonna be some people that are just not comfortable and they're just not. And
Yeah.
whatever you do, and that's okay. That's okay. It may not be the right environment for them, and they need something a
Sure.
little bit more stable and a little bit more less chaotic and whatnot. Which I don't know where you can find that these days, to be honest.
No. Right. Yeah.
But that's okay to aspire to have that type of environment. I mean, there was a time in my career where I did not want to lean in. I had young kids. My mother was ill, and my husband's family were having some needs, and I did not want to grow in my career. I just wanted to maintain. And
Yeah.
there was about a year and a half, I was bored out of my mind. However, I could not take on any more and, take on any change. And I made that clear to my managers at the time. I said, I am not going to lean in or lean back for that matter, but I'm going to stay still where I'm at. And here's the reason why. And I'm going to do a great job, but I am not going to be able to do anything more than that. And then once that phase, I got that under control, I was able to lean in, more and more.
Yeah.
But I think that it's okay to recognize sometimes that, this may not be the right environment for me now because of what's going on in my life or my family and whatnot. And when the time comes, then I will be all in
Yeah.
and embrace the change.
Absolutely. I think that's great advice, and I think it's smart to recognize where you are and not break yourself trying to be something you shouldn't in the moment. So,
Yeah.
no, that's great, and that experience is invaluable. So, thanks for sharing it with us. You know, as we get to the end here, I have to ask. It's on the tip of everybody's mind, but how should finance teams, in your eyes, balance adopting emerging technologies? And in particular, I have to ask, like AI,
Sure.
while still balancing the risk of it, right, and maintaining internal controls and oversights.
Right. I think it's a great question, and I'm glad, we're talking about it because it needs to be top of mind of every CFO and every finance executive. Because here's what I think: every company is going to have to deal with AI,
Yeah,
and those that do will be the ones that will succeed, or maybe they'll be the only ones around. Right?
sure.
If you embrace the AI, because it it is cutting edge, it is going to change a lot of things. It is definitely going to streamline and be a competitive advantage.
Hmm.
Now, what I've been saying is, controls and doing the right thing is always right, and I think AI is risky in the sense that you lose control. You don't
Hmm.
know what else is. I mean, I'm no expert in technology, but I do know that there are risks with AI. what I think needs to happen, and a CFO needs to champion this, is the same investment that companies needs to make in AI and in the talent and in the infrastructure of AI, an equal amount of investment at the same time needs to be in controls and in security and in education and whatnot. So those two have to go hand in hand. If
Yeah.
you do one and you don't do the other, then yes, you may be unaligned and you may have some risk. But if you do look at it as it's a holistic investment in your company, in your business, in your team, but not to put the controls aside, you have to also advance in your controls because actually AI can help with that. You have to invest in cybersecurity. You have to invest in, and you can't just get insurance and say I'm covered. Your companies have to take some initiatives in these avenues so that the AI is effective and successful. So I think one goes with the other. I don't think it's one or the other. I'm passionate about controls because that's where I grew up and whatnot. And I honestly, that's how made my life easy because I knew the controls worked.
Yeah.
And to think that AI is not going to take place or not take over, I think would be naive of me to say that because it is already taking over. I mean, I have
Yeah.
an AI personal, stylist that styles my
Yeah.
clothes and whatnot. And I mean, like, and I don't have to pay for it. And I mean, it's
Sure.
just amazing things that AI is helping with. And also it could be also negative in many ways. But the reality is it's here to stay, and it's only going to get more integrated into our businesses and our lives. So then what do we do about it is let's get on top of the controls and the security
Yeah.
and all the risks that AI brings to companies sooner than later and make that a conscious investment now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can't stick your head in the sand with it. You've got to make sure you have control over it. And I think one of the best ways to do that is, take it bite by bite, piece by piece. Don't try and, bake it all in one day. So I think that's great advice. I really appreciate that. And if you get out to these events that Diana and I go to, you'll see it's on the tip of everybody's tongue, and a thought on everyone's mind. So great to get your insight of that as well. As we get to the end here, I've only got a couple more questions. It seems like it's flown by, but what skill do you think will be indispensable for CFOs over the next decade?
Uh, you know, who knows what the next decade is going to be like, right? I mean,
Flying cars, you know?
yeah, right, or electrical vehicles, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, I will say, I mean, CFOs need to be the champions of change at any company and really the sound of reason in the sense of what we just talked about.
Hmm.
AI, yes, it needs to happen and CFOs need to get on board quickly. But you also need to look at the other aspects of the business like we talked about with controls and security and whatnot. I think when it comes to driving business and fueling the business to growth, there's that has to be a top of mind for CFOs. Businesses in some cases are really struggling right now, whether it be because
Yeah,
of supply chain issues, competition, demand, retail challenges, etc., real estate challenge. I mean, there's you name it, right? And
sure,
so CFOs have to have top of mind is how do you grow the business? What ways,
sure.
what creative ways do you do to create to sustain the business and to keep it? And it may not be the traditional ways. It may be something completely different.
Yeah,
But I think that has to be top of mind as far as from my perspective at least, is how do CFOs help the business get to the next step? And of course, the CFO has a lot of responsibilities in ranging from obviously the accounting and the transactions and in the budgeting and the forecasting and whatnot. But being a business finance leader, I think is the key here is to really be in tune with the business and be able to support the business. Not only from the budgeting and forecasting and approving and disapproving, but really being there a decision maker with the business as far as how to fuel the growth and really grow the company and take it to the next level.
yeah, absolutely. That's great advice, and I think it'll serve people well. And on the flip side of that, final question of the session, what advice would you give to aspiring, young finance professionals who aspire to become leaders, maybe even the next CFO?
I'd say, keep on dreaming and keep on putting those goals for you.
Okay.
Sometimes it may seem like it's such a far stretch, or maybe the environment you're in just doesn't seem like it's going to happen. But I would say never give up,
Yeah.
and be intentional with what you do. And if you're in an organization, I always say look at the next 12 months. And the budgeting season is a great way to evaluate that. If there are projects and investments in the company that are going to grow you, then you're suited to stay there for that next 12 months.
Yeah.
But if you are at a position in a company where you're not seeing anything new and you're going to get stagnant because you're not, there's no new initiatives or new projects or new ideas that you are going to be able to participate in, then evaluate whether going somewhere else is going to give you more of an edge on your career and teach you and get you exposed to other things. And that's really been the driving factor in me when I decide to leave is, I get to a point where I don't think the next 12 months is going to gain me as much as leaving and going somewhere else and getting
Sure.
to know a new industry or getting to know new people and whatnot. So I'd say, keep your goals in mind, always reach for a higher, you know, aspire to get your goals and work on those goals, just like any business goals. Have your
Sure.
own for your own personal goals and invest in yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. And I think continuing to invest in yourself is a wonderful advice as well. So, Diana, I just want to thank you before you leave today for joining us. You've had a really illustrious, storied career. So it's great to have you on and get all of that knowledge. And I hope that academic position or involvement comes to you. I'm sure you put the positive energy out in the world, it will. Don't listen to your kids. And yeah, thanks again. And so, that's this episode of The Next CFO. Diane, do you want to say anything before we sign off today, or are you good with the
I
word?
just
Yeah,
want
go
to say
ahead.
thank you, Matt, for you and the team in putting this together. I think this is a very valuable program. I look forward to watching other CFOs as well and learning from them. Thank you for taking the initiative to do this, and especially because of the focus on new and coming finance leaders and making sure that there's a message for them as well as far as an advice as to how to go to the next level and whatnot. So thank you, Matt, for
Yeah,
doing this.
absolutely. And we like to keep this program pretty agnostic, but Planful is my company, and we are pretty proactive on trying to stay involved in the community, uplifting those voices, and having our finger on the pulse of the next generation and understanding what they want. So, all kudos to leadership there for really backing us in this endeavor. So I really appreciate that shout out. But thanks to our audience out there, and we'll be back and see you again at the next CFO episode to come. Thanks, Diana.
Thank you.